Well, the Investing in African Mining Indaba starting in Cape Town today. You heard earlier and you saw the Minister of Mineral Resources and Petroleum, Gwede Mantashe, speaking. Xolani Mbanjwa, our business editor at the event. Xolani, good morning to you. Certainly to my ears, it sounded like Minister Mantashe was talking up coal, used a phrase we haven't heard for a while, king coal, an old phrase going back hundreds of years, saying king coal is back. Certainly a strong statement of support for coal one way or another.
Good morning, Stephen. Yes, indeed, when it comes to that opening address by the Minister of the Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, he has not minced his words, whether on the side of government or the side of the public sector, the private sector, as far as his views when it comes to coal. As you have heard, for a number of years now, there has been this drive against fossil fuels for the betterment of the environment. But telling thousands of delegates at the opening ceremony here, he was again very clear that when it comes to king coal, it's not going to go away anytime soon. What we need to focus on is making sure that it is made clean, and we have those technologies such as companies. One of the companies that I'll be speaking to later is a company that is actually turning coal into fertilizer, because when it comes to the minerals that we are talking about here, that the men and women who are here are gathered for, it's all the things we use on a daily basis. But there's been another issue of US President Donald Trump being a huge talking point here, and I'm joined by one of the delegates, John Humphrey, who is the United Kingdom High Commissioner when it comes to Trade Commissioner for Africa, in fact. John, thank you so much for your time this morning. Your big takeaways from what the minister said and his speech in there around future-proofing when it comes to African mining, something that you are very much au fait with.
Yeah, absolutely, Xolani. I think that for everybody, I mean, it's clear that mining minerals, they can't be purely extractive anymore, that there has to be increased value addition, increased beneficiation in Africa, and that's a way of creating jobs and lifting people out of poverty. I'm just losing my voice. But I think, British companies are very much committed to that. And, sorry, excuse me, I've lost my voice.
My apologies for that. I will go back to John in a minute as he tries and find his voice. His voice has returned. You were talking there about the involvement of the British, when it comes to Britain, when it comes to African mining. How far in terms of investments, and what are the changes we are likely to see compared to the historic, investments that are extractive that we've seen going forward?
So, I mean, I think you see that already. I mean, British companies like Rio, companies like Anglo, which of course are international companies and have as much of a foot in other countries as they do in the UK. For example, Anglo is very much a South African and a UK business. And I think that you see the corporate social responsibility programs, the training programs, the increased value addition here. I was in Zambia not that long ago to help open a nickel concentrate facility, looking at increasing the value of that product before it gets exported out of the marketplace. And of course, where there's a possibility for refining to be done and the actual materials to be produced and then down into manufacturing, which is all the things that Minister Mantashe was talking about this morning. So I think the UK is very much committed to that. And definitely in terms of investment, and I think you can see that with British companies. They're good to work with and they take their responsibilities seriously. I mean, mining's always going to be difficult because by its very nature it's extractive in a way, but doing it responsibly is definitely what British companies and British investors are very interested in.
John, let's talk about somebody who has been looming large since the 20th of January, the US President Donald Trump. A lot of delegates here are actually talking about how that particular second term and administration could impact global trade. He had words for South Africa yesterday, as many of us have heard. What is your take in terms of how his second term could disrupt trade on the African continent? What does your glass ball show you as far as world trade and these trade wars and the impact that they could have?
So I think certainly from a UK perspective, we're as a government very, very committed to open trade. The UK has always been a very open economy. We have our developing countries trading scheme where many African countries can export to the UK, tariff-free and quota-free. So I think we've always been committed to open trade, and we've always been committed to the multilateral trade system. So I think that very much is definitely our direction. And I think historically, I mean, there are definitely some imbalances in the world, I wouldn't deny that, but I think in general, the global trading system has been very successful at lifting people out of poverty and creating jobs. So I think it would hate to see that unravel. And I think the UK has also been a very strong supporter of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So one of the defining features, one of the differences in the African continent compared to the rest of the world is there's a very low level of intra-African trade. An intra-regional trade is often value-added trade because you build regional supply chains, and actually that's vital, really. So the UK has been was an early supporter of the AFCFTA. We were the first non-African country to sign an MOU with the Secretariat. We've provided support, and very much I see our equivalent of the sort of AGOA and things like that, the DCTS, very much supporting that building of value chains in Africa. So I think the UK is very committed to this, and I think it would be a great shame if that starts to unravel.
So do you think the African Continental Free Trade Area would be an answer to the disturbances that could come with the warmongering on a trade basis from the US administration?
Whether it's a short-term answer or not, I don't know. I mean, the EU took many, many decades to develop its approach to as a trading bloc together. So we're expecting a lot from the AFCFTA in a short period of time. But nevertheless, I think that sort of direction of travel and the progress that they've already made so far is really significant. And I think actually growing into regional trade from an African context is probably one of the biggest things the continent can do, actually, in terms of it improving its global position.
John, thank you so much for your time. John Humphrey is the UK, His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa, and he says that there is a lot of work that the UK is doing, and he shared his thoughts there about what he thinks the role of trade and global trade should be in terms of how it goes on after the threats that have been made. Really nothing really to talk about when it comes to many of the things that delegates are actually talking about. Trump is at the top of it, but we heard from John saying that for the UK, they are supporting diversity, they are supporting African trade, and they are here to invest and be part of the African story. Back to you in studio, Stephen.
Xolani Mbanjwa, thank you very much indeed for that. More coverage, of course, of the mining Indaba through the day.